All right, so welcome everyone. This is our next to last session of this of talking about going chapter by chapter through the book, translating what isn't said, and uh, it's been a wonderful series. I put a link up to the registration for the final session on October 11th. Translating what is and isn't said, voice, gossip, and feedback. We do have a very exciting lineup that we're starting to plan for 2025, talking about research, ongoing research, some of which has not even been published yet. So this will be a great chance to stay on the cutting edge of the topic of nonverbal communication, team communication, cross-cultural communication, really trying to build on what we've done here this year. We're very excited today to have Professor Leigh Anne Liu join us for a second time. She's a co-author of the book that we've been discussing. This topic she'll be discussing today is exploring workplace incivility across cultures. Professor Leigh Anne Liu is also director of the Institute of International Business at Georgia State University. She studies how culture and cognition influence intercultural interactions, including negotiation, conflict management, and collaborations at individual, organization, and national levels. Leigh Anne was awarded the Fulbright Hankin Distinguished Chair in Business and Economics in 2020 by the U.S. Department of State. She has lots of various teaching appointments abroad, but I think without further ado, I'll go ahead and just let her take over, and we can hear directly from her. Great, thank you, Leigh Anne.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to share my screen. So it's great to meet everyone. So this chapter I wrote together with Xiao-Ping Chen, but she's in China. It's midnight now, so I will represent her to talk to share with you this chapter about incivility. Here's a quote we'll start that we start the chapter with. People may hear your words, but they feel your attitude. So a lot of the communications are nonverbal, especially, I guess, incivility is the negative side of communication. So we define workplace incivility as the low intensity, deviant behavior with ambiguous intent to harm the target in violation of workplace norms for mutual respect. Uncivil behaviors are characteristically rude and discourteous, displaying a lack of regard for others. So this is our general definition. In this chapter, we'll talk about, okay, how culture influences incivility, various incivility behaviors. And especially the nonverbal ones. And we want to end or conclude, apply our communication context network to bring a holistic consideration of communication, and explore the implications, how message, relationships, time, and space, how these domains of communication context can reduce misunderstanding so that we can foster information exchange, quality of communication, trust. So how do we transform the negative negative effects of incivility, the negative communications? There are nonverbal expressions of workplace incivility. There are many. We just want to list a few here that you can see that, so eye roll often indicates disdain and lack of respect. Ignoring, meaning not acknowledging anything, or when someone is talking, then others just talk over. So show not acknowledging the existence or the voice of others. Invading personal space, meaning intentionally standing too close, intimidating, or assert dominance, or it can also mean like inappropriate personal space invasion. The body languages are often like crossing arms or turning away or not even look at someone, like eye contact. Eye contact, we can talk more about it, like eye contact in the culture, in cultural differences are in Eastern cultures, eye contact can mean direct eye contact can be perceived as rude versus or challenging, versus in Western cultures, eye contact, steady eye contact shows you're trustworthy, you're paying attention. So there are cultural differences in there as well. We can talk more about that later. Facial expressions like smirking, frowning, that shows disapproval or mockery. Those are all can all indicate negative impressions and negative messages that's being communicated. Tone of voice, so sarcastic or condescending voices are often perceived as rude. And then pointing fingers aggressively or make dismissive hand waves, that's probably universally being perceived as aggressive or ignoring someone. And then there are like okay signs that's okay in one culture, but can be offensive in some other cultures. And silence, again, intentionally withholding response to isolate or exclude someone. This can also be another example of the nonverbal cues of workplace incivility. Of course, there are a lot of others. I'm just listing a few. So these are the kind of things that we try to address and in our chapter. So, and by the way, please interrupt or raise your voice if you have any questions or comments anytime. I just have a few slides, but really want us to have a conversation about these. So the key forms of incivility at work, ostracism, silent treatment, or social exclusion. These terms are often used interchangeably to show that ignoring and excluding individuals or groups or avoiding someone intentionally at work. This is like one form of incivility at work. Remember, it's like intentional kind of treatment for someone. And it's low intensity, so it's not like suddenly happened. It's often like gradually or perpetually happening in the workplace. Microaggression are the subtle indignities expressing hostility or insults. So a lot of times, a lot of the research are not clearly defined or measured, because you may perceive, the victim may perceive something as microaggression, but the person who initiated the behavior may not feel they are intentionally doing so. So this again, we call these are the covert forms of incivility at work, because they are not directly expressed by words or by overt behaviors. So microaggression especially is like very subjectively perceived as something as microaggression. Or like especially this especially like around gender, like women may think men say something at a meeting as microaggression. Actually the man may not feel like, oh, they're just feeling patronizing or they're well intended, but the woman can feel like, okay, they are gender specific kind of remarks that can be perceived as hostility or insults for women. So we think so. Microaggression may be in between the covert and overt incivilities. We call the abusive supervision and bullying the overt kind of incivility at work. So abusive supervision is especially from a supervisor to a subordinate, is sustained hostile verbal and nonverbal behaviors. And bullying are the deliberate and repeated aggression. All of these forms can be verbal or nonverbal, but they are more of the verbal type are studied more than the nonverbal forms. And we think the nonverbal forms of incivility are especially relevant in cross-cultural settings. So I would like to, any comments or things you observe in your multicultural settings? Anyone want to give an example? Haiyun, you work with international students in schools, so like bullying behaviors is probably pretty common.
Yeah, I think a lot of time, because we have students from nearly 30 different countries, what I observe, they would start to speak their native language if they wanted to exclude someone, and then keep engaging in their native language, then speak a shared language and make everyone feel included. That especially if it's a group, in a group, there's someone they really prefer not to interact with.
Right. That's linguistic exclusion. Yeah, very intentionally excluding someone, and yeah, definitely that works. Thank you for sharing that. So the cultural and in the chapter we try to review the literature and look at cultural influences on overt and covert incivility. There is some research showing that when someone was feeling excluded or then the congruence versus incongruent exclusion. This is when the research shows that when the social exclusion is congruent with your culture, especially in individualist cultures, then people will, let me try to, so,
It should be down the bottom. There gotta be a button somewhere on the bottom.
Okay, then that's great. I didn't do anything, but now we're recording again. Great. So, yeah, I was talking about the norm congruent versus the incongruent situation. So, in like individualist cultures, when someone feel being excluded, then they they may feel that's more well, still not acceptable, but they may feel less of the negative effect versus in incongruent situation. So, and then the different sensitivity in acceptability and perceived negative effects of these incivilities at workplace. There are research showing that people in collectivist cultures feel the like collectivist cultures because of the social connection. So people like the negative effect for social exclusion is less impactful, is because in collectivist cultures or social in there's a high degree of social interdependence in collectivist or interdependent cultures. So I hope that's some research. And again, earlier we talked about the direct eye contact or avoiding eye contact. So in Eastern cultures, you're avoiding eye contact sort of shows your respect, or like the other person is deferring to the authority of the other party, versus in Western cultures, avoiding eye contact is probably perceived as